such a love-hate relationship with cancer, right? Like on the one hand, it brought me my business and I'm so grateful for that, right? Like my business is bringing joy to people. My business is bringing comfort to people. My business is doing good in the world and that feels amazing, right?
Welcome to the Growth Mavericks podcast, where we know that entrepreneurship isn't just about strategy. It's about stamina. It's about disrupting your default and getting comfortable being uncomfortable so you don't burn out before you break through. I'm your host, Adam Callinan. Let's get to work. Liz Benditt has survived cancer 6 times. She is now the founder of the Balm Box, which is a cancer care gifting consumer brand to replace all the pink trinkets and blankets and all the things that she was gifted in her 6 separate battles with cancer. And I mean, we obviously spend a lot of time talking about her experience in building an incredible amount of durability and resilience through all of those ups and downs of dealing with significant illness. We get into her business and why she used and how she used surveys. Early on in COVID, she got over 10,000 responses on this survey that revealed this massive gap around caregivers and cancer therapy and all the things that, unless you have directly dealt with it, which I have not, to be clear, you don't really understand. And given her unfortunate deep domain expertise in dealing with cancer, she just has an incredible perspective on life and struggle and living, and quite frankly, how that applies to building a bootstrap business to help other cancer patients and really the caregivers around them support those cancer patients. So this is really a fascinating conversation. It's not every day that you get to have a conversation with someone that has been through that many ups and downs medically and been able to apply that experience into a consumer brand. So really incredible conversation. I hope you enjoy this talk with Liz Benditt. Where are you calling in from? Part of the country?
Calling in from Overland Park, Kansas. It's a suburb of Kansas City.
Amazing. Got it. How's the weather there? It's getting cold here in Montana.
Yeah, today's the first, yesterday and today are the first long sleeve days. Like it's all of a sudden we went from sweating gross hot to lovely cool fall.
Did you grow up in Kansas?
I didn't. No, I'm a transplant. My folks moved to Kansas City when I was in college, and I came here after college, or after grad school rather, when my mom herself was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I wanted to be closer to her. So, and then I thought for sure I would go back to California, and it didn't happen. We met a boy, got married, bought a house, and now we joke, you can fit our mortgage inside. My little brother lives in Northern California, so we can fit our mortgage inside his 4 times over, and we can fit his house inside ours 4 times over, right? It's like,
I moved to Montana in 2020 from Manhattan Beach.
Love Manhattan Beach. You can only imagine the square footage differential, right? Yeah.
When we moved here, we kept our house there for a little bit, mainly because my wife, Katie, had to have an escape from the winters. And It was fine. But it was like our house there could fit inside our house in Montana about 25 times over.
Yeah.
Entirely different situation.
Yeah. It's just a different life. It's a different life. I mean, there are trade-offs, absolutely. But I don't regret it at all. It ended up being, I think, a really good place to raise a family and, start a business, right? Like every cost is 1/3, right, of everything that my friends on the coast pay for. So.
Absolutely. So obviously we'll get into the business and its starting point, but I think it's helpful to understand what happened before that.
Yeah.
So you graduated. Yeah. You graduated college. You ended up back in Kansas.
I did.
Outside of Kansas City. Were you working corporate or were you a startup junkie early on like I was? How did you do that?
I was always a corporate nerd. It never occurred to me to do my own thing. So my undergraduate degree is in broadcast and film. I went to, my very first job was working for one of my college professors was hired by the Disney Institute in Orlando, Florida, to start up a business. And now we're going to go way back, and you could just turn in my early 50s. But yeah, his name is Steve Sklow. this big barrel of a man. Like he was just really big and interesting and fun. So the Disney Institute was Michael Eisner's idea of the Disney-fied version of Chautauqua. And I think that the biggest mistake they made is that they plopped it, because it was really cheap to do so, on one of their resort properties in Orlando, Florida. And I do think that like it was such a cool idea, but they needed to put it in a more elite location. Like had they done it in like Breckenridge, or I don't know, like even Miami, like just somewhere that wasn't Orlando, then it might have been successful, but it actually failed. So I was part of a Disney startup failure, which is pretty unique, an interesting experience. But as part of that experience, so the first couple of years, we created this Disney News Network studio, and guests would come in and we would guide them through creating like an entire news program. So like reporters would go out and create little packages, and it was really fun. And I did a ton of editing. And then one of the things that nobody thought about was when people were done, they're like, oh, I'd really like a copy of can I get a VHS tape? I mean, this is how old this was, right?
Uh-huh.
So they're like, can I get a VHS tape of my Disney News Network experience? And we were like, gosh, that's such a good idea. And so I got it. Here I was 21 years old, and I got put in charge of figuring out how to do it. So I had to like work with the people at the gift shop to create a process to order, like how the orders would come in, how people would pay for them, how we would get duplicates made, just the whole 9 yards. And so I created this little profit center for our department, and it was super successful. And I kept talking to my dad about how great it was and how proud I was of like creating this. He's like, are you sure that you really want to go into film? Like, because it seems to me that what you're really energized by is this whole business thing. And I was like, that's just such an interesting point. So so I ended up, after kind of doing that, I started thinking about grad school, because of course my degree was in something very artsy and I needed more, math and operations background. And so I applied to grad school and I got my MBA at USC in California. So went from Boston to Orlando to Los Angeles in less than 5 years. And then graduated right at the top of the dot-com boom. And like I said before, like I really did want to go work I wanted to go work in dot-com and e-commerce for sure. But my mom was sick and she had breast cancer and I wanted to be closer to her. And they, at that point, were living in Kansas City. My parents bopped around. I moved around a lot as a kid. My parents moved, like I said, to Kansas City. I had gone to visit, but I wasn't ever really, it wasn't a place that I knew very well. And I got a job at Hallmark.com, and great experience. Did not love, it was not a great fit for me. And Hallmark is an extremely conservative organization. And that just came through in lots and lots of different ways. And so I don't want to disparage it. It's a great company, but it was just not a good fit for me. And I had the opportunity to bounce and go be employee number 3 at Bluetooth Wireless Technologies, and I took it. And and then I kind of did the same thing. I did that for a couple years and loved it. I ended up traveling so much. I think in less than 2 years, I earned like 100,000 frequent flyer miles, or like something really crazy. So my husband and I went on this very bougie trip to France, and then we were like, how in the world are you going to, get pregnant, let alone have a baby and or see that child on the schedule that I was on? I was like, that's a really good question. Left Bluetooth, went to go work in-house at an ad agency in Kansas City. So, that's kind of like my whole circle. And ended up doing agency and then in-house advertising and marketing for companies for the past 20 plus years. So that's kind of like that's the background, if that helps.
No, it is helpful because there's, any listener that's heard this podcast before, I talk a lot about chapters.
Yeah.
There's these really clearly defined chapters
For
through
sure.
there it's like you're making this big bowl of soup and all those chapters contribute to the soup. And then one day you taste the soup and you're like, oh, this is really good. And it all kind of comes together and tells a story and picture of how and where you got to where you are
Got to where I
today.
was. Yeah. So the last corporate job I had for about 4 years, I was VP of marketing at a commercial transportation company. Again, very, very conservative. I was the only woman on the leadership team, only woman that presented to, it was owned by like a group of PE companies. And at the time I thought, wow, this is so cool. Look at me. And it was very isolating. It's just really, really hard. I got very tired. And in that time, So if we go back to, my current chapter, that was also the year in that time frame I had my first breast cancer. And up until that was my fourth cancer at that point. And so and we can talk about the cancers at some point, which is the overlay, right? But I had my breast cancer, and to their credit, they were incredible. As a small company, they just worked around what I was able to do, my schedule, my surgeries, my treatments, everything. Like they really were phenomenal. But you come through all of that and start to think about, is this really what I want to be doing? Am I happy? Is this the life? Are these the people I want to be surrounded by? And the answer really was no. And so I started thinking about, and that was also at the time, especially when I was going through all the breast cancer stuff, people kept bringing me all of these things that were gifts that were so well-meaning, right? Like they were all about, here's a pink warrior t-shirt that says my tatas tried to kill me. And like, I'm not going to wear that, but it's
Yeah.
funny, right? And a lot of food and a lot of flowers. And especially when I was going through my radiation treatments, I really couldn't eat normally, and scents were a problem for me. Like they just were and so like anytime someone brought like a really powerful smelling dinner or like flowers or anything, like I couldn't be in the same room as that stuff. Like it just, again, all these things were so well-meaning. So everyone wants to help. They don't know how. And I kept thinking, like, why can't gifts be functional? Like, I need an ice pack that won't leak through my clothes. I don't need, these irises that smell so strong. Go away. And that was really where the idea for my current business, the Balm Box, was born, was this idea of functional gifting. But that really wasn't the time in my life, right? Go back to chapters where we were living on two very specific incomes. And my husband at the time worked for Sprint, now T-Mobile. And when you're living on two salaries, you can't just go rogue and live on
Yeah.
one. I mean, people can, but by choice, it's not a great idea. So we started thinking about, okay, what would it take? Could I go rogue entrepreneur, and what would that look like? And how much money do we need to have saved? How do we need to change our lifestyle? And one of the biggest expenses for us at that time, or the biggest expense at that time, was childcare. And so the thought was, okay, when we can get rid of childcare, when our kids are old enough to like drive themselves around to their own after school activities, and when we don't need any more childcare, that, after taxes is like half of one of our
Yeah.
salaries. So let's wait until we can do that. And fast forward to the pandemic, right? In the pandemic, no one's going anywhere, and we didn't need childcare. And at that exact moment, I had it just dropped in my lap, this opportunity to go teach undergraduate classes as an adjunct at University of Kansas School of Business. So certainly, while the income teaching is nowhere close to what I was making corporate, it was something, right? It was in the going from, okay, so I don't have childcare expenses anymore. No one's going anywhere. We're not traveling because it's COVID. And now I have a little bit of like, side hustle income from teaching that makes it very doable. And so that's when I could let go of my corporate stuff and go rogue entrepreneur. And then I've held on to, and so the teaching has been amazing. So I've been able to hold on to teaching really for the past 5 years. I even won an award for being a good
Nice.
teacher, which is great. It's really fun. It's so great. Like I really enjoy connecting with the students. I get access to research. My colleagues are really fascinating. And so I've gone up and down in terms of, as the business was in its early startup phases, I was up to teaching like maybe 3 classes a week. And now I'm down to 1. Like that's really all I can handle is the ones, but I'm not ready to walk away from it entirely. Right. But it's really nice. It's nice to have it there. And then certainly it's always this little bit of like, it's a little bit of air cover that should my husband ever get terminated, or not terminated, laid off, he's been there over 10 years, then we have a source of healthcare. So, or health
Sure.
insurance, because my family cannot be without health insurance. So yeah. So that was kind of the career path. And then that gave me the airway, the runway I needed, to be able to get the business off the ground.
There's a lot in there in that entire career path
Yeah.
that I want
Yeah.
that I want to dig into. I'll try to not make this a 3-hour podcast.
That's okay.
What are you teaching? This is the easiest of the
Marketing.
questions.
Yeah.
Cool.
My
Marketing.
background is in marketing. I've been a marketing executive, like I said, for about 20 plus years, 25 years. And the class that I've been teaching it's called Survey of Marketing. It's the intro to marketing class that all students have to take in order to access 300 level or 400 level marketing classes.
Got it. Okay.
And then I've
In
filled
it,
in, like when teachers have been on, like I filled in to teach an advertising class when someone was on sabbatical, and then I've also taught CRM, so.
yeah. If we go back, you mentioned that when I don't know, this is kind of what I want to clarify. Did the Balm Box come up? You mentioned the fourth time that you had cancer.
Yeah.
So,
I'm on
we can,
6. Let's
yeah.
hope that we're done. I'd really like to be done with it. I don't believe I am. I just kind of feel like this is sort of my life.
Is that something that started young? And so it's
Yeah.
sort of always been part of who you, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. My very first cancer, I date them by my kids. So if you think about it, my daughter just turned
Wow.
20, right? So my very first cancer was melanoma. It was summertime. My daughter was 3, my son was 1. We were at the pool, and I tell this story about how my son, when you're like the 1-year-old is kind of close to losing the naps, but just kind of wiped out, and my son had fallen asleep on my chest. And it's July in Kansas and it's hot. And so he's slippery because we're both sweating, but he's asleep, and I'm enjoying it because I know, right? It's a second kid. I know that I'm almost done. And so I was in this like really contorted position to kind of hold him in place so he wouldn't fall off me. And my mother was there, and she kept looking at this mole on my leg, and she didn't like the look of it. And she's like, that just doesn't look right to me. You need to have that looked at. And I'm an executive. I'm busy. I don't have time to go to a stupid dermatologist. Like, this is so stupid. My mom is being ridiculous. And my mom would not let up after that day. Like, she was just on my butt, like texting, calling, whatever. She made the appointment. Like, she was really aggressive. And my mom saved my life because it turns out that that mole was melanoma. They said, okay, well, we're going to do a lymph node biopsy, and, removing the melanoma is a surgery. And, you can't see on a podcast, but it looks like I have a shark bite on my thigh because it was huge chunk of skin they take off to make sure they get clean margins. But then they
Yeah.
also had to check lymph nodes to make sure it hadn't spread. And what they said is if it spreads to lymph nodes, you have less than a year to live. And if it doesn't spread to the lymph nodes, you're fine. Wear more sunscreen. Like, those are the
Wow.
choices.
That is, talk about a binary outcome. Holy cow.
Right? Yeah. And so I had my surgery on a Friday, so I wasn't going to, and it was like one of those pathologies that required like time or something. And so didn't get the pathology until Monday. So that weekend, again, mom to the rescue, like just, it was helpful to have young babies at home who are just little need machines, right? Because they don't know that you're waiting on this call on Monday, right? They're just like,
Yeah.
so bath time and snacks and activities and whatnot kind of, took over. And then Monday got the call and it hadn't spread, and just wear more sunscreen. And, so then I became a complete fanatic about like hats and sunscreen and SPF. I found this SPF additive that I add to our clothes. When my kids were little, like they had to be like covered head to toe. I'm so jealous. Yeah, my little brother has little kids, and nowadays, like, they have, like, the kids' swimsuits that are already long sleeve and whatever, but, like,
Yeah.
I had to, like, really, like, find stuff for my children until my daughter turned about 13, and she was like, "Mom, I am wearing a bikini, and that is that." And I was like, "Okay, but if you get one sunburn, we're going full, hijab."
Yeah. Smock. Yeah.
And that's been the rule ever since. And even now at 20, like that's the rule. One sunburn, you're out. And she's been like a sunscreen fanatic too. So it's fine. But yeah, no, that was melanoma number 1. That was in 2009. And then a year later, I was getting a breast exam, just a normal, like, because my mom had breast cancer, I was supposed to start my mammograms
Yeah.
early. And so I went in for my first breast exam, and they didn't like what they were worried about something. And at the time the surgeon started, when you go in for these things, then everyone and their mother's feeling your boobs. And then she started feeling my neck. And I was like, what are you doing? I don't understand. Like, I thought the whole issue was the boobs. And it turns out at that time, there was nothing going wrong. It was just an aberration or something in the breast tissue. But at that time it was thyroid cancer. And so the thyroid cancer that was 2010, like not even a year later. And that sucked. And the short version of thyroid cancer for me was, I ended up in this teeny tiny percentage. I had to have a thyroidectomy. Once the thyroid is out, 2% of patients have this side effect that I had, which is I became what's called hypocalcemic. So there are the parathyroid glands are next to the thyroid glands. I don't know how like deep into this we want to get. It doesn't matter. Whatever. Point is, I had this like really, really rare side effect that is very, very serious and you can die from. And they didn't know at the time. And I went home, almost died, had to go back to the hospital. Was there for 2 weeks until they figured out a medical treatment to get me off of what's called IV calcium. It sucked. That was not good. Don't recommend. 0 out of 10. And it took me about a year to kind of get healthy again. And it was because you can't always rely on, like, doctors will give you medicine. Like, all they know to do is write prescriptions, right? But there's a fair amount of other things I realized that I needed to do for myself to get healthy, including everything from a different type of exercise, more cardio. I had to drop gluten, which interestingly enough, like really helped me hold on to my calcium better. So just a lot of those things. And I think it was a very big aha moment that, okay, I'm not walking away from Western medicine, but in addition to Western medicine, you can do these other things and they can really help. And so I got into running, ran my first half marathon.
Amazing.
Then third cancer number 3 came along, and that was a basal cell. And so at least at this point, I'm really used to going to the dermatologist, go twice a year, get naked. They look at every inch of your skin. It's a very humbling experience. And but this time it was just a little nudge on my nose, and the nudge on my nose turned out to be basal cell. So again, basal cell, not nearly as aggressive as melanoma. No one's telling me that, take it off and maybe you'll die. But it was more of the problem was that the nudge was large enough that they needed plastic surgery to cover the hole in my face.
Mhm.
And the first plastic surgeon said, okay, well, we're going to draw a line from I'm trying to think how to say this instead of show, right? From the inside of your eye and then all the way down your cheek and curve around your jaw. And then that will loosen up the skin enough that we can cover up your nose. And I'm like, so I'm going to have this giant C-shaped scar on my face the rest of my life. And he's like, yeah. He's like, when do you want to book your surgery? And I'm like, well, it's just, let me just think about that. So I went to a different plastic surgeon and said, is this the only way to do it? And he had a totally different process. And his process was, to be fair, way more complicated and way more miserable. And it required 2 surgeries and it was bonkers. Like I had to be awake for one of them. I don't recommend that. But like they did this thing where they put the cut on the shadow of my nose and then did this thing, like, when you stick your fingers in a turkey to like put in the stuffing? Like, I was awake for this. I can't tell you how much I don't recommend this, but
Man.
they stuck his fingers in and like basically separated my skin, my facial skin from my skull, I don't know, face, whatever. And that stretched the skin out. And then they put this like temporary bandage on my nose, like, so a sewn on bandage that I wore around for 10 days. And then after 10 days, you come back and take it out and it stretched the skin enough that they could cover up the hole without doing more aggressive surgery. And so I do still have a scar, but it's very subtle and you don't see it. And so it maintained the shape of my face. And that, again, so you learn, right? So you learn through this process, like I can actually advocate for myself. I need to, be a little bit more aggressive about making sure that if I don't agree with the treatment or if treatment sounds terrible, like maybe I can ask what the options are, right? So it's a lot of those little things and that made all the difference. So that was 2015, 2017. Like I said, I had my first breast cancer that was on my left side. I was able to get away with a lumpectomy and radiation. And like I said, super miserable, radiation is one of those treatments where I think people have the assumption that it's not as bad as chemo, which is absolutely true, but, it was really rough on me. You basically are accepting sunburns on your boob. It was on my under boob area. Chunks of skin started falling off. I had to stop multiple times because my skin was in no shape to be continually radiated on. It was just really tough. And I think what was particularly tough is I went in really arrogant. I went in thinking, I'm in this this waiting room of all these old ladies and me in my early 40s. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, I'm so much healthier than these people. Like, this is going to be no big deal. I scheduled all of my appointments for like 7 a.m. so I could just knock them out and get to the office. And it just wiped me out. I was not prepared for how sick I was going to be. So like I said, the company I was with was incredible. I was so lucky, so unbelievably lucky. So, I went from working, 60 hours a week to barely being able to be in the office 25 without falling asleep and being in too much pain or needing a Vicodin or something. And they were absolutely amazing, worked with me, the staff, and my staff was incredible. And I just got this like rally around the forces situation was incredible, right? Not everybody has that kind of support. And I got through it. And then, again, it takes time to get healthy again. So you get healthy again, kind of forget that everything is, that you're going to get sick. And then fast forward, like I said, so that was when I had the idea for the Balm Box, but didn't really have the time or the ability to start it. So it wasn't until about 3 years later that I started the Balm Box. So we can come back to the Balm Box if we want to finish cancer. I don't know. What order do we want to go in?
I mean, these are all defined chapters.
Yes, I know,
that
right?
get you to where you are.
And so then in 2020, I finally was able to start the Balm Box, which was awesome. And I had 2 years of the Balm Box before I had another cancer diagnosis. And so that was in 2020, the end of 2022, which was 5 years after my first diagnosis, which is when statistically you're supposed to be in the clear. I was diagnosed with a second breast cancer on the opposite breast. So it was not a recurrence. It was just a straight up different breast cancer. And unfortunately, that one I had to have a mastectomy. But the good news was it was caught early enough because of all of the screenings that I get that I didn't need radiation and I didn't need chemo. It was just surgery. So I was really lucky. And so I was able to so I had a mastectomy. And then about 8 months later, I had a reconstruction surgery called a deep flap reconstruction surgery, which is totally badass. It's where they take your belly fat and they turn it into a boob. So it's a tummy tuck boob situation, like paid for by United Healthcare.
Nice.
And yeah, it was awesome. And so don't get me wrong, it's a hideous surgery. It's really hard to recover from. But once you get it, there's a lot of benefits in that it's real flesh as opposed to fake. And so it feels like a real appendage, or at least slightly more than like when you have implants. Yeah, so that was 2023 was just surgery, recover from surgery. And then another probably 6 months of physical therapy, because when you have this surgery and they take all this skin and flesh from, at least for me, in your lower belly, for most people, you're hunched over. Like you can't even sit up straight. And so it takes time to stretch out that skin so that you can sit up again, and to really rebuild my stomach muscles, which were a mess after. Did all of that, got through it. Started running again, I'm always a runner. So I got back into running, and I was like, I'm going to run another half marathon. I want my body back. It belongs to me. It doesn't belong to cancer. And I started training, and then I got another fucking cancer. And this one, at least, it was another melanoma, but it was on my calf. And so it took me out of running just long enough to not be able to, hit my mileage goals for the Kansas City Marathon. So I had to go to a different marathon. That was October. I was going to do an October marathon, so instead did an April marathon. So instead of training through the hot summer, I trained through the cold winter. And I was doing 12-mile runs in 20-degree weather because I was committed. I just wanted it. I wanted to do it. And I did. And I ran my half marathon. I did not get a PR, but I finished across the line, and that felt really good. And I don't know that I have any great interest in doing another. I feel like a 5 to 7 mile run feels great, and I don't need to do any more 10-milers. I'm good.
Man.
So that was the last one.
You are one badass woman.
Nah.
So there's so much buried in there. And I will say that I really seek out in my life people that have really gone through difficult things. Like other, people in my life, I've interviewed them on this podcast, but they're just in my life because I am absolutely fascinated and have so much deep love and respect for having gone through like truly difficult things, like survived a plane crash, lost a leg, was born, on a battlefield with no limbs and left in a box in a park and a nun picked him up. Like, paralyzed, quadriplegic at 30. I mean, really challenging things, which you very much fit into that sort of thing. And the reason for me, Liz, is because it helps me. I have not had to deal with any of that. And knock on wood, I don't have to. However,
I hope not. Yeah.
It really helps me. And this is what I want to pass on. It really helps me reset my perspective of what difficult looks like and what a hard day looks like. And what, particularly in entrepreneurship, like what we deal with in entrepreneurship is hard in that scope of entrepreneurship, but in the scope of life and the real challenges that some people deal with, it's like laughable. It's nothing. If you're an early stage e-commerce brand doing anywhere from startup to 5 million a year in revenue, Pentane was built for you. It can help you operate more profitably. just launched is a pulse check report. This shows you what's working, what's not working, and exactly what to do within your business. And this is not just general advice, it is very specific. Like raise your prices by 4.6% to get to break even, or you need to hit a 2.34 return on ad spend in order to remain profitable with your marketing. It's far better than a report you'd get from an outsourced CFO that would cost hundreds or even thousands of dollars. And right now it is totally free. Head to pentane.com/pulse check to learn more.
I think a lot of it, I have such a love-hate relationship with cancer, right? Like on the one hand, it brought me my business and I'm so grateful for that, right? Like my business is bringing joy to people. My business is bringing comfort to people. My business is doing good in the world. And that feels amazing, right? Like we get thank you notes from people that are private and make you cry. I read, when the order management system, the first 2 years, I was the only one filling orders. Like it was physically me packing boxes. And, you read every single gift note and they're amazing and heartfelt. And some of them are awesome and hilarious and deeply inappropriate to share on a podcast. And some are, really religious. And they just span the gamut. And connecting, friends and family and helping them support and love their friends and family, like what an amazing business, right, to be in. And that makes me so proud, right? Like that is just such a gift. And yet at the same time, like it also does provide perspective that like, okay, I definitely reduced my family's income. We changed our lifestyle. There are no more like really bougie Christmas trips. And my kids and husband have just been nothing but supportive because they see how happy I am and how, I don't know, like perspective, right? Like they see that I'm happy. They see that um, they're excited about the growth of the business. They were really excited when we moved out of the house because it was getting it was getting to be a lot. So all of that, and it does provide perspective, right? And so I don't, we're not going to Club Med anymore, but the kids see me more, and I have been able to go to every single one of my daughters ever since volleyball tournaments, and I didn't miss anything. I didn't got to go to my son's tennis games, and I travel when I feel like it. And I don't, if I don't get the P&L done until next month, like there's no one breathing down my neck for it. Like if I decide that I want to take a risk on some crazy idea, and I do, I really am very much enjoying this side of my career where I don't answer to anyone.
The fact that you see and have a love-hate relationship with cancer,
Yeah.
like speaks, that's it. And that's where, again, my friends, these people that I have in my life, they have the same. Like my friend Yane broke his neck jumping into the ocean, was an All-American linebacker at Georgetown,
Shit.
but now he runs a nonprofit that changes lives, absolutely changes lives. He has a love-hate relationship with paralysis. Like
I
there's so
wouldn't
much
be doing
beauty in
this.
that.
Like I wouldn't have, and it's funny, and I think about, entrepreneurship, because you asked, did I always want to be an entrepreneur? And I say no. But then I think about how it kind of is a little bit in my blood, where I never met my grandfather. I think he died when I was 2. So it's my dad's father. But he was like, he grew up in Brooklyn, and he was like a junk dealer, like one of those dudes, like, that had like the junk mobile. I don't even know what it was, like a push cart maybe. And then over time, he grew into different businesses. At one point, he had like a newsstand. Like I don't know all of his different businesses, but basically he was a serial entrepreneur. And my dad even has a little bit of that, where he is an engineer with an MBA, and he has gone in, and he basically his career has been going into underperforming manufacturing companies and fixing them, and then getting bored and moving on, which is why we moved around a lot of a family. But he also, I think, just loves to run businesses, right? He's created lots of businesses along the way in terms of just product development and creating products and businesses. So he's done that with underneath the overhead, right, of bigger businesses. So it's not a surprise to a certain extent. Like I do think a little bit of it is in my blood to go out and do my own thing, path my own course, create something from nothing, right? I do think that there's a lot there. It's got to be there.
Yeah, it's definitely there. So talking about that, can you explain to the listener what Balm Box does?
Yeah. So it's sort of all the moons aligned in the most incredible way. So if you go back to the pandemic, right, the stay-at-home order, put your mind there. That is when I thought, okay, this is put up or shut up time. This is my opportunity. And we all of a sudden, I didn't have weekend long volleyball tournaments in Omaha, and I didn't, have to run around to 17 volunteer things and whatever. Like, all working parents know this. And I had this opportunity, and I kept thinking, is it just me? Am I the asshole that doesn't like all this pink crap and doesn't want, all of these, generic gifts and really wants functional things as a gift? Or is it just me? Or does everyone feel this way? And what is the market size? Like, I don't even know who's out there buying gifts. Like, is this tiny? Is this big enough to even make it a real business? And so I wrote this in survey, and the survey went down paths. And if you previously had cancer, you answer questions about things that you want to need when you were going through treatment, and you gave them ratings of 1 to 3. 1 being this sucks, 2 being I don't know, and 3 being yes, absolutely. And if you hadn't had cancer, it asked you, have you bought a gift for a cancer patient in the past 18 months? If so, would you spend, would you buy? And because it was a stay-at-home order, and because everyone was at home and super online and bored, it went viral and collected almost 6 responses with no incentive. And it took like 40 minutes to complete. It was like something to do. And that was amazing. And so the feedback was incredible. So I am not the only one. When you ask cancer patients things that they want to need, the top 5 items are all functional. They were all things like ice packs, lip balm, lotion, fleece blankets, essential oils, which is something that I had never really thought about. The bottom performing items, the things nobody wants: kicking cancer tote bags, kicking cancer coffee mugs, worry stones, inspirational poetry, right? Like, nobody wants this shit. And then you ask people, have you bought a gift for a cancer patient in the past 18 months? Almost 80% had. And what are they buying? Flowers, food, and trinkets. So you've got this huge disconnect, right, between what people want and need and what they're buying. And by the way, a lot of them are out there buying it. It's a huge market. And I thought, okay, well, that's a business model. So I wrote a business plan, borrowed a little money from dad, built out, a baseline product, right? So my idea at the time was, in year 1, I kept thinking, okay, I'm going to make it a subscription model so that cancer patients can buy this for themselves. And they would be, you would buy like a radiation subscription or a chemo subscription, so that you would get a box every so often, every 2 or 3 weeks, with things that you would need while you're going through treatment, depending on how long your treatment was. And as I was developing box 1, 2, 3, 4, I thought, well, gosh, these boxes could also be like one-off gifts. And so it was a very last minute decision to offer gifts. And in year 1, 80% of sales were gifts of these one-off boxes, and 20% were subscriptions. And I was like, okay, I guess I built a gift store. Didn't know that. So then in year 2, I really monkeyed with, okay, if I'm going to be a gift shop, let's change our messaging, right? All the messaging, if in year 1 was all about talking to patients, in year 2, switched the messaging to talk to what I call caregivers. And so caregivers is a very broad term I'm using, which is basically like any friend or family of a cancer patient. So it's not necessarily someone that's like, taking away the bedpan. Like, when I say caregiver, I just mean friends, family. So caregivers. So we really focused on that caregiver messaging. How do you care for someone with cancer? What are things that you can do? How do you be supportive, right? How do you support yourself if you're caring for somebody with cancer, right? So really focusing on that caregiver message. And so switching that around, and then playing a lot with product, right? So that when we say entrepreneurship, product market fit, right? And so trying to figure out, if I'm buying for myself, I know what my side effects are, but a cancer caregiver doesn't necessarily, especially if they're not physically there, right? So if they're 3 states away, they don't know really, they know you're going through chemo, but they don't really know if you're having neuropathy. They don't know if you're having hair loss. They don't really want to ask. That feels really invasive. They just want a generic cancer care box. And so I saw that where the neuropathy box got 1/8 as many sales as the generic cancer care box. And so I eventually got rid of all of the side effect boxes and focused just on chemo box, radiation box, mastectomy box, right? Small, medium, large. And then we also changed up language. So instead of small, medium, large, we call them essentials, comprehensive, and tremendous. And the logic is, if you're buying a gift for a patient and you receive the essentials box, you don't know that you got the small one, right? You just know that you got a box. So it's just kinder. And so just like lots of those little things. And so when we eventually got rid of all of those side effect specific boxes and focused just on these kind of more what I would call generic boxes with a little bit of everything in them, our conversion rates doubled without me changing anything about advertising. And then we're off to the races, right? And now I can afford to actually hire an ad agency. Now I can afford to hire people. And so over time, and that was by the end of year 3. So we doubled sales, tripled sales. Like it was really moving the needle forward in a very meaningful way. And so that was very, very exciting. And so by the end of 2023, I was still running everything out of my house. The guest room was what we called Balm Box World Headquarters. And I had completely taken over the garage, and that was the warehouse. And my husband was not happy about having to dig his car out of the snow, but he was great. Like I make jokes. He was so supportive, and we pack all of the boxes with a bunch of kind of, green shreds to protect the items in them. And there's green shreds all over my house, like just green shred-a-thon. Couldn't get rid of the green shreds. And at some point, we were bursting at the seams. I had nowhere to put stuff. I was starting to take over space in the basement or the dining room. And my husband was like, really? Like, are you sure that you don't need, and you're making money, you're making a profit. Can you afford to move? And I was like, that's just such a good idea. I didn't even think about that. So he called a friend who's a real estate agent, and he's like, yes, you need to move. And he found us this amazing space, and we're really, really happy in it. So moved in early 24. Yeah. So yeah, I've been here almost a year. So, and it's been just completely life-changing, now, because before, when I was working out of my house, you have to hire people you kind of know, right? They're in your house. Now I can have anyone come through, or it's a little bit more broad, and it's not quite so hardcore. Not to mention, I have 2 full-time staff now that need desks and computers. I don't know where I would have put them in the house. That would have been, someone would have lost a bedroom. I'm not sure. So yeah, a lot of that, the ability to expand, the ability to have more warehouse space, and the ability to not have to babysit packages, just a lot of stuff like that has been just a game changer in terms of just the ability to grow. Getting out of the house was huge.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Are you selling then entirely online, or do you also create relationships with hospital systems and
such a good question. So wholesale is an area that we have been dabbling in. And in fact, I could not keep up with the B2C direct to consumer side of the business is so all encompassing. Every time I kept trying to work on the wholesale side of the business, it just was a secondary assignment, and there's just only so many hours in the week. And so eventually I hired a full-time staff member to take that over, and she started this year, this is April or so. And so oh yeah, so I guess we've been here a year and a half. Time flies.
it
So yeah,
does.
so Marnie came in middle of this year and has been building out our wholesale business. In fact, after this interview, we have a call with a pharmacy to talk about our retail product line. So it is absolutely in the growth plan. I'm hesitant to go into hospitals right now until we finish the patent process on some of our products, because I'm a little nervous about them getting ripped off. So we have a provisional patent on one product that we created called our drain holder. Next year, we'll work on the patent process for our pillow products, but I can't do 2 at once. It's too expensive. I'd love to, but I don't have enough cash.
It is. Side note, and I will caveat this with, I am not an attorney, although when Bottle Keeper, my last company, got acquired, we had 42 patents. So we spent a lot of time in the patent process.
I can only imagine how expensive that was.
Man, when your patent goes live, have your patent attorney make sure that they file a continuation. It's called a CIP.
Okay.
And that leaves the patent open so that you have the ability to amend the patent over time, and it becomes a new patent because people will design around your patent, and it allows you to encapsulate their redesign. Patent attorneys are like doctors, good note, and accountants. Some are really good, some are really bad.
Yeah.
So make sure that when you get to that point, that's the thing that comes up.
I will. We're probably about another year away. I think, we have to file in first quarter, and
for your utility,
we're for the utility patent. Yeah. And that one, but there's some changes I'm trying to make, and we filed the utility patent about 9 months ago. So we have another more than I guess that's not true. Filed the utility patent this year.
You filed a provisional patent this year, or a utility patent?
Provisional.
So, so it's your placeholder.
It's a placeholder.
So 12 months.
But I
Perfect.
want to make some changes to the clips. And so I've been working with our manufacturer in Taiwan. And so he's so great. But we do communicate through a language translation app, which is hilarious. And there was actually the fun fact is, through this language translation app, we were thanking each other, and in thanking each other for our work, he said, "You're my best friend." And I'm positive that's not what he said, but I'm dying to know what he really said. Who knows?
Maybe.
Yeah. So we now refer to Andy as my best friend in Taiwan, which
That's
is,
awesome.
yeah, it's hilarious. And so, yeah, we're working on just some changes. And so I'd like to finish those changes before we file the utility
Utility.
patent. Yeah.
Got it.
So my best
Great.
friend is out there working on it for me.
It's good to have a best friend in Taiwan.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So generally in this podcast, we would spend some time talking about the things that you do and the practices that you might have
Yeah.
that help you sort of deal with entrepreneurship. So I want to go down that rabbit hole,
Yeah.
but I want to add an element to it because we have actually spent a lot of this time talking about some of the really difficult things that you have done and gone through. So I will add a caveat to that of thinking about it in the context of not only what you do, but what advice would you give a 30-year-old first-time entrepreneur, that hasn't had to deal with the really hard things that you have that may not be quite as probably anti-fragile as you are.
I will tell you that the number one thing that has given me, two things that I can think of immediately off the bat. The extent to which you can start without borrowing money from, venture or PE or whatever, where if you can do private, if you can start it on your own with a minimum viable product, right? And not have to answer to anyone, that gives you so much flexibility. So that when I was going through, cancer number, 5, and I was slow to complete reports, and I took probably a month off of just straight up work and delegated to everybody. All of that it's not like anyone cared. I didn't need permission, right? So if the P&L didn't get done or the budget wasn't done or the expense reports weren't done, it's just me. I'm just answering to myself. So these are things that I think are important to do and make sure that they are done so that I'm following my business, but I can let go of that for a month or two while I give myself space to heal, right? So if you're going through anything, whether it's personal or professional or health related, just having that flexibility and not answering to anyone is, I think, invaluable. So I would start with that. So the extent to which, if you can at all do it. And so then, which is connected to number 2, I know that there's a lot of different theories on this. I think it has been such a gift that I had this flexible part-time job teaching at KU because it's provided me a little bit of income and versus going just straight up income free, which is really hard to do. And so just enough income to pay the bills and, and keep us in coffee and bagels, it's just enough. And that to me has been also and that gave me the runway that I needed to get to my product market fit because I didn't need to take an income out of my business. I was just getting paid by KU. So I didn't start paying myself anything until 2023. And that's a long time to go without any income at all. So, but being able to bring in at least something was awesome. And it doesn't have to be teaching. It can be working at Starbucks. It doesn't really matter. I'm just saying, it's something to bring in, I think is huge. I know that there's definitely some folks that think, no, you got to be hungry. You got to be scared. That's what's going to be really great for business. And I don't agree with that at all. I really, really think that having time and space to figure your shit out is important. And learning to live with just a little less income is also really helpful.
Yeah, I think both of those are incredible points that I deeply agree with.
Yeah.
And it's certainly how I have always built, and I have a lot of friends and have seen in this world specifically that I have seen the other version of that where they do go raise a bunch of money. And because they remove that constraint of capital, they make a lot of really bad decisions. And they spend on things that they would not ever. Doesn't make them bad operators. They're really good operators. It's just the constraint. Removing that constraint can lead to really bad things.
Yeah, right. So when you're cash constrained, then all the priorities bubble up and it makes it really clear to see, okay, that's not even it's not urgent that we get all of our patents at once. It's just not. It's okay.
Yeah.
We can wait. There's one that I think is more important than the other, so we're doing that one first, right? So it's those little decisions, not to mention, but I also was like, it's worth it. I absolutely need to bring on somebody because these other growth opportunities aren't happening until I bring in staff. And so I made that choice to make that investment, and it's been one of the best investments, right? And just all of the work that is
Yeah, it's
getting
great.
done and growth that I'm seeing, and that, that it's going to happen. I mean, right now she's a cost center. That's okay.
Yeah.
She's meant to be. Like, that was the intention, but she's going to be, but she's key to growth, and that's going to happen in 26, and that's okay. So it's a lot of like being able to make that choice, but having to make, that was a hard choice to make, right? Going from being profitable to break even is really hard. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, this has been incredible. How do you want people to find you and to find Balm Box?
Find us on the web, on the interwebs, w.thebalmbox.com, THEBALMBOX.com.
I will make sure all of that links and
Yeah,
everything end up in the show notes, so that's easy. Are you screaming and yelling on social media at all, or?
we are. We're going to do our first influencer campaign in November. Excited about that. We mostly, in terms of advertising, the best advertising for us, we are heroin drip addicted to Google Shopping. The goal for 26 is to diversify, but it is such a good tool. It's been such a great tool for us in terms of growth. How do you find people? How do you target people that are friends and family of cancer patients, right? Like, that's so discreet, unique. It's just not very targetable. So it hasn't been. That is just such a good tool. So I'm not suggesting we walk away from it, but I think we just need to add other things that to grow. So we just signed on with a new ad agency this year, and I'm really excited about that, and investing a lot more in SEO. But no, we haven't like really invested in growing our social following. And that's something that if you talk about bubbling up, right? Because I'm still self-funded. Like, whatever the business generates is the money we have to spend. And growing those social platforms hasn't been a priority, and I think in 26 we need to revisit that. But part of that has just been, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so adding staff, adding people, changing up, like the new agency is a total game changer. So those things all will contribute to us being able to do more there. So we are on the socials. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. We do post all the time, but we just haven't invested in growing that following, we need to do that. It's on the list.
Only so many things you can do at one time.
Totally,
Totally get it.
right? Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being so honest and sharing your story. It really is an incredible story, and I
Thank
think
you.
will resonate with a lot of people. So really appreciate your time, Liz.
Thanks for having me.
A huge thanks to our guests today. Don't forget, this is powered by Pentane Financial and Advertising, Command Center for Consumer Brands. Stop what you're doing, put your phone down, walk away from the computer screen, go outside, get some air, do something hard, push your limits, get uncomfortable, become more durable and more resilient, create the stamina required to get through those entrepreneurial barriers, stay in the game for as long as you can, and we will see you next time.